Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. I feel like
Shabbat Shalom.
It's so wonderful to have so much energy in the room that we have to say Shabbat Shalom several times and raise my voice, not quite in the way that I sometimes have to at home, but always wonderful because that's the sound of people connecting. It's what and there we go. And it's what we've come here to do, whether you're sitting in our small chapel or if you're joining us on the live stream. Tonight is about community. It's about celebrating and welcoming Shabbat and having the opportunity to take a deep breath, which we all do together. And as we let that deep breath out, we also take a moment to greet one another, not just those people. We know it's going to get loud for a moment again, and that's okay. But we take a moment to greet the people seated around us, not only the people we already know, but we invite you to make sure to wish a Shabbat Shalom to someone you have not yet met. So let's take a moment to do that. Shalom again. So we're going to invite you to come back together. A little bit of feedback always helps. Thank you. And we're not calling an end to the connections and the connecting. We're going to be able to do more of that in our oneg following our Shabbat service, but we want to take a moment now to just turn our thoughts to where we are and to this moment, not only in our Jewish calendar, but in our lives. This evening, as with any Shabbat, is about past. We reflect on the week that has been. It's about present. It's about this moment. And it's about looking ahead as well to the future. The same is true of any moment in the Jewish calendar. It's built on the past, on our experiences throughout our history, on this moment we share, and this strong foundation that leads us into our future. And so I share that because as we find ourselves on this Shabbat, which is the Shabbat before Yom HaShoah, it's also a Shabbat that is preceding another Shabbat when we will celebrate and reflect on the history of the state of Israel, both its past, its present, and thinking together about what its future could and should be. We'll have opportunities for so much reflection in these days ahead. But this evening, I invite you to just consider the ways in which we look back and balance that, and always try to find a balance between past and present, because you will notice that sometimes, at some points and moments in our service, we might be at one point in our Siddur, in our prayer book, which is Mishkan Tefillah, which you can find in front of you. Unless you're in the front row, it's directly under you. You'll find us in one spot, and at times it might seem like we're going backwards in the prayer book, but don't be alarmed. It's just because in putting together the service, we like to reap the benefits of all of the beautiful liturgy that we have, and we're not doing the entire Siddur. So this evening, there may be a few moments of back and forth, but we will guide you through those. And most importantly, we invite you to bring your voices and add your voices to the joy of Shabbat that we will share together.
And so we continue our service on page 22. As we join together starting at the second line of Hebrew with Tov Lehodot. And as I mentioned outside, sorry, David, as I mentioned outside, we, for those on live stream, we will be honoring our German heritage by singing this evening music that was written by German composers, German Jewish composers.
And we'll be doing that in honor of our guest this evening, German Ambassador Emily Haber, who we're so delighted to have and so honored to have with us this evening.
And we're grateful for our quartet and David Lang for helping to make this service even more beautiful. Tov, Tov, Tov lehodot, Tov lehodot Adonai. Tov, Tov, Tov lehodot, Tov lehodot Adonai. L'zamer l'shimcha elyon, l'shimcha elyon, u'l'zamer
page 20, we come to Lecha Dodi. So we're flipping back. Don't worry, we'll move forward again. And actually, this is a prayer that enables us to move forward. It is a prayer that is has been used traditionally to greet Shabbat not just with our voices, but in a physical way as well. And so when we come to the final verse, and I believe we're doing verses 1, 2, 5, and 9, I'm just checking because we have that on there. We will rise as a community to welcome Shabbat and symbolically to greet the presence of Shabbat as Shabbat enters into the chapel, along with anyone else who might happen to walk in at that time, who will also feel welcomed by our smiles as they come into the chapel. And then we'll after that we'll be seated before Baruch Hu. And so as we turn to these words of Lecha Dodi, we prepare to welcome Shabbat. We will signal you when to turn to face the entrance.
As we turn back to page 22, I invite you to meditate on the translation of Psalm 92 as we listen to Tzadik Katamar.
Israel.
continue on page 29. There is one who sings the song of his own life, finding everything within himself. There is one who leaves the circle of herself and sings the song of her people. There is one whose voice rings with the song of humanity, hoping for the highest perfection. And there is one who rises even higher, uniting with all creatures, with all worlds, filling the universe with song. Nivarech, let us bless. And so we rise together for the call to worship. We join together in the middle of page 32. Everlasting love, you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem
I invite you to join with me on page 36 as we continue chanting Ve'ahavta.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levacha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'beitecha u'vlachtecha b'derech u'v'shochtecha u'v'kumecha u'kshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha u'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'b'yisharecha leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kadoshim le'Elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem. Amen.
We join together on page 37. Love your God with every heartbeat, with every breath, with every conscious act. Keep in mind the words I command you today. Teach them to your children. Talk about them at work, whether you are tired or you are rested. Let them guide the work of your hands. Keep them in the forefront of your vision. Do not leave them at the doorway of your house or outside your gate. They are reminders to do all of my mitzvot, so that you can be holy for God. I am Adonai your God. I led you out of Egypt to become your God. I am Adonai, your God.
We turn to page 42 for Hashkivenu, a prayer that is specific to the evening service. In some ways, it is a lullaby, asking God for extra protection as we sleep.
Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, hamidenu makenu l'chaim, uferus alenu sukat shalom lecha, v'taknenu b'tzat tova milfanecha, Haser Satan milfanecha umeyacharecha ubetzel kenafecha
And as we turn the page, we celebrate this day of Shabbat. As we join together in Vishamir, we recognize that it is Shabbat in some ways that has kept the Jewish people alive. And so we continue on the top of the page, page 44.
Vishameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Vishameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. B'nei u'ben b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam, oti le'olam, oti le'olam. Vishameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz. Vishameru b'nei Yisrael merit olam. Ubayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorot ha-merit olam.
Prayer invites God's Spirit to suffuse our spirits, God's will to prevail in our lives. Prayer may not bring water to parched fields, nor mend a broken bridge, nor rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, and rebuild a weakened will. And so we rise together in prayer as we turn to page 46, and as we continue on the even pages through the beginning blessings of our Amidah.
Adonai, sefatai tiftahu fi agitehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanara, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'koneh HaKol, V'zocher Chastei Avot v'imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei B'neihem, Leman Shemo B'yahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh HaKol atah Rav Lehoshia, Mori Hatal, Mechakel Chayim Bechesed, Mechayeh HaKol berachamim rabim, Solech noflim berofei cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato lishenei afar, Michamocha bal geburot, Umidom elach, Melech memit umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, B'ne'eman atah lachayot hako, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hako. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, U'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh.
We continue together in the middle of page 54. You set aside the seventh day for your name, the pinnacle of creation, and you blessed it above all other days, more sacred than all festival times. So it is written in your Torah, the heaven and the earth were finished in all their array. On the seventh day, God had completed the work that had been done, ceasing then on the seventh day from all the work that God had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, and ceased from all the creative work that God had chosen to do. We'll hear these words a little bit later in our service, actually read by our bar mitzvah for next Shabbat. But those words that I just read, come from our Kiddush, our sanctification of this day and of joy. And we continue together at the bottom of page 54. Our God and God of our ancestors, be pleased with our rest. Sanctify us with your mitzvot, and grant us a share in your Torah. Satisfy us with your goodness, and gladden us with your salvation. Purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Adonai our God, grant as our heritage your holy Shabbat, that Israel, who sanctifies your name, may rest on it. Praise to you, Adonai, who sanctifies Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha-Shabbat. Our clergy at Washington Hebrew, as many of you know, participated, as did our congregation, in February in the annual Repro Shabbat, Shabbat honoring and commemorating and standing up for reproductive rights. And there's a blessing that is being shared in congregations around the country on this Shabbat, following last week's decision, and actually yesterday's decision, last week's decision during Pesach by 2 federal courts to continue to chip away at the reproductive rights of Americans. And so Jewish communities around the country are crying out for freedom on this Shabbat using versions of this prayer, which we have adapted, a prayer written by our colleague Rabbi Stephanie Crawley of Temple Micah, and we offer this prayer. I offer it on behalf of all of our clergy for our community. Bless their holy bodies, bless our holy bodies, and bless the decisions, the ones that could be made in clinics and in homes with safe medications, the ones that were made out of medical necessity, that gave safety and saved lives, the ones that were made in hope for the future, the ones that were grieved over, the ones that were painstakingly fought for, the ones that stood against immoral legislation, and the ones made in the embrace of freedom. May everyone always know agency and dignity and love, and may this community never fail to rise in support. And we know that there are a number of different ways that we reflect on wholeness and on healing. And I share, as we prepare to turn to our words of Mishaberach, our prayer for healing, I take a moment as we turn to these words of prayer, which we do on every Shabbat. We take a moment to think about those in our midst who are in need of healing, those in our lives, whether they're sitting with us or not, who are in need of healing, whether of body, of mind, or spirit. I will share that on this Shabbat, as I'm about to invite you to share names for a Mishaberach, a prayer for healing. This prayer takes on a little extra resonance as my own doctor sits in the congregation this evening. And we know that there is a balance, always. There's the spiritual and the emotional, and there's the physical. And there's the care that we can provide for one another by letting each other know that we're not alone in a time and in need of healing. And so we invite you to, in a moment, to share names of those in your lives who are in need of healing. If you are joining us on live stream, we invite you to share those names aloud. But we also invite you to make sure that we've heard those names. Not all at once, we'll hear them now, but we also invite you to follow up with us so that we can be sure to reach out to those in our community who are in need of extra support and are in need of healing. There's a teaching in the Talmud that says that if one visits someone who's ill, it's as though they've taken away 1/60th of their illness. And we know if we could all just go and visit and take all the illness away, we would do that in a heartbeat. But until that moment and that miracle comes, we also provide strength to one another. We add strength to our lives. We support one another. And we allow those who are in need of healing to know that our community is not only thinking of them, not only praying for them, but is here to support and guide both those in need as well as their family and caregivers. So I invite you, as I look around the congregation, if you have the name of someone in mind who's in need of healing, again, whether of body, of mind, or spirit, I invite you to share their name aloud, or you can keep it privately to yourself and share with us later.
Lesson and Susan Brennan Long.
Baruch atah Adonai Rofei HaCholim. We praise you, O God, healer of the sick. And we turn to page 253. add to that list for Misha Berach the names of Mary Solander, Joanne Lamb, and Lois Copeland. And we know that there is certainly that sense of healing that we seek for those who are in need of healing, but there's also a sense of wholeness that we seek each and every Shabbat. And often we express that through the words of prayer, prayers like our Birkat Shalom, our prayer for peace, which is also a prayer for wholeness. And we also know that beyond the prayers that are on the pages of our prayer book, there are additional prayers that are not found here, at least not all together in one place. And those are the prayers that each one of us has in our hearts. Whether we know the words, whether the words are already rising to our lips and we're hoping the rabbi will sit down so we can get to our personal prayers with God. But sometimes we have a little bit of difficulty, a little bit of a challenge finding those words for whatever reason, whatever is happening in our lives or in the world around us. And so we take a moment to take a step back from one another, to be for a moment not focused on the needs of the community, but to focus on what each one of us has in our hearts. And so we pause now for a moment of silence so we can each take this moment to be not just in quiet, but to have a moment to connect and to communicate with the prayers of our hearts.
My rock and my
It is a pleasure and an honor to welcome our guest this evening, German Ambassador Emily Haber. Ambassador Haber has been ambassador to the United States since June 2018, and we are getting her just in the nick of time before she leaves this summer to enjoy some well-earned relaxation and some quiet time. Prior to her transfer to Washington, D.C., Ambassador Haber served in various leadership functions at the German Foreign Office in Berlin. In 2009, she was appointed political director, and in 2011, state secretary, the first woman to hold either post. Thereafter, she was deployed to the Federal Ministry of the Interior, serving as state secretary in charge of Homeland Security and migration policy from 2014 until 2018. Ambassador Haber has spent a good deal of time stationed in Russia, but has been an ardent proponent, of Germans providing arms and aid to help Ukraine. We are grateful to Leslie Maitland, who made the connection and extended an invitation for the ambassador to join us on Washington Hebrew's behalf. And many of us here know Leslie's family story and the story of her mother, Janine, which Leslie lovingly recorded in her book, Crossing the Borders of Time. What you may not know is that Leslie and her son, Zach, who was, by the way, in my first confirmation class here at Washington Hebrew Congregation, sought to restore her mother's German citizenship and transmit it, as has been done by many Jewish descendants of Holocaust victims. And Leslie discovered that unlike her cousin, whose German parent was his father, a man, she was unable to reclaim her mother's citizenship because in Leslie's case, it was her mother and not her father who was a German citizen, and as the law was then written, she was not able to reclaim her mother's citizenship. Ambassador Haber was instrumental in pushing through a change to what many perceived a sexist law in the German parliament and making that possible. And not only did she work to make that happen for Leslie and for so many others and to create a more egalitarian sense of how the law should be practiced, but she also hosted the subsequent ceremony through which that German citizenship was transmitted to Leslie and Zach. And not only did she just host it, she hosted it at the ambassador's residence. And at the time as well, Ambassador Haber, knowing Janine's story, gave a very personal speech expressing that that was the very least that she could do and that Germany could do. This evening, Ambassador Haber will address a number of issues of anti-Semitism in Ukraine, and she will also speak, I believe, to the disruption of international relations in the world today, and perhaps will also share her perspective as to how the devaluation of truth has made it possible through social media in particular to fan the flames of anti-Semitism, hatred, and conflict. And I know one of the reasons we're so delighted to have you here is that she is going to share with us exactly as she sees it and be honest and frank. And that is the best way to form and connect and make a relationship, is to have that honesty. I know that she will look forward to speaking to anyone who would like to during our ONEG following, but even more importantly, to continue and to sustain this relationship into the future. We are so grateful for your friendship and your presence with us this evening. Thank you for joining us, Ambassador Haber.
Thank you. Rabbi Funkman, Cantor Botnick, thank you for inviting me to speak to you tonight. It really is a privilege. As I prepared for this occasion, I assumed that you would have the following main questions to me on your minds, and that is there a new anti-Semitism in Germany? And if so, how is it rising? What is Germany doing against it? And is it going to last or even grow? And the answers I will attempt to give will be incomplete, subjective, and probably not very satisfying. But they will be honest. But let me begin with a flashback, because it will place in greater relief where we are today. In 2004, Berlin hosted the first ever OSCE conference on anti-Semitism. The OSCE, that is an Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. It's a pan-European organization in which the US and Canada are also members. Its point of departure was the 1974 Helsinki conference, which turned out to be one of the most important nails in the coffin of the Soviet system. It's now paralyzed because of Russia's war on Ukraine, but in 2004, it was quite alive. So, in 2004, governments and non-governmental organizations, many of them Jewish, from across the over 50 OSCE states gathered in the massive building of the German Foreign Office, which had been erected for the German Central Bank in the closing years of the Weimar Republic, and which had housed the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the GDR until 1991. History is never very far in Berlin. That the conference was held in Berlin was not a foregone conclusion. The American Jewish Committee had been the driving force behind the idea. It had lobbied for a conference to be held in the large OSCE framework because it correctly foresaw that this could shape an institutional and normative framework for combating anti-Semitism internationally. And it was the AJC that had suggested Berlin as a venue. I happened to be the head of the OSCE division in the Foreign Office at the time. And when I thought about it, I believe that 10 or 20 years earlier, that would have been unthinkable. Berlin, after all, was the place from where the Shoah, the repression, expulsion, and murder of European Jewry had been conceived and overseen. But the rationale was this. Those of you who have visited Berlin will be aware that there is a second city underneath the pavements of the present one. The city where Jewish Germans constituted a significant part of the population and had made great contributions to our nation's cultural, scientific, and economic achievements. In many places, the memory of this city punches holes into the pavement and appears at the surface. The memorials, the museums, the plaques, the ubiquitous stumbling stones, little pavement stones made of brass and bearing the names of Jewish residents of the building and the dates of their lives and place of their murder. So the idea to hold this conference in Berlin, where memorials and remembrance of unspeakable crimes against Jewish men, women, and children are omnipresent, was the starkest possible reminder of where the culmination of anti-Semitism had led Germany. It was also an expression of the shared determination and vigilance not to ever let this happen again, anywhere, and to resist the beginnings. The conference was a success. At the time, we believed that this would be a starting point for placing the fight against anti-Semitism in an organization with member states stretching from Vancouver to Vladivostok. And it did for a while. But little did we know. At around the same time, in 2004, the German sociologist Wilhelm Heidmayer had published the first of his long-term studies on group hatreds. He interpreted statistics to understand how these hatreds evolved, how their framing worked, and what instruments could help to contain or altogether suppress them. He basically concluded that governance, that is, a combination of education, sanctioning, tabooing, government incentivized approaches could create a mainstream consensus translating into social pressure that over time would diminish or end group hatreds. He he was not wrong. His conclusions, at least some of them, continue to be the defining elements of our national strategy against anti-Semitism today. But again, little did we know. Both vignettes are a little less than 20 years old. But our world has fundamentally changed since that time in ways we would not have imagined in 2004. For one, the OSCE is fundamentally split. It's a key on norms and values, which included the fight against anti-Semitism, is under siege. The trend is not a consequence of the war in Ukraine. It started much earlier. But the war in Ukraine has shredded any illusion that might have persisted about this deep division of our world. It has consequences for the fight against anti-Semitism too. Last week, the former Russian President Medvedev posted an obscene and revelatory tweet. He used fascist language to demonize the Ukrainian president and Ukraine. His slurs included, I quote, Nazi regime, Unter-Ukraine, with the intended association of Untermensch, thievish Nazi clowns, nobody in this world needs Ukraine, that's why it will disappear. So here we have a prominent representative of a state that used to draw much of its legitimacy from its history as a victim of Nazism and from its contribution to the defeat of Nazi Germany. We have come a long way since the 2004 conference, in which, of course, Russia had participated. And in a similar vein, when Heitmeyer wrote about his findings, the promise of the internet, transparency, equality of access to knowledge and information, still seemed to outweigh, by far, the concomitant risks. Today, the latter have become blatantly clear. The emergence of echo chambers where fiction becomes reality. Platforms not only for the spread of information, but also for the spread of myths and conspiracies and outright lies. And the interconnectedness of hate groups or conspiracy followers across continents. More access to information also means, unfortunately, more access to disinformation, to conspiracy theories, to hate groupthink, to anti-Semitism. In the past, traditional media served as goalposts, did the editorializing, fact-checking. It was part of the professionalism, and most of them continued to do this today. But at a time when everyone can become a producer of information, the rules that have worked previously begin to lose their grip. This affects the basic understanding of and consensus on what is true and what is untrue. And it has consequences. It has consequences if our perception of reality is no more subject to logic and empirical observation, but instead reflective of our belief systems and bias and personal attitudes. After all, democracies have been shaped by the modern and scientific understanding of and commitment to truth. So surely if that erodes, it will have an impact on democracy too. But this is not only a threat to democracy from within. It also opens venues of attack from outside, and in many ways. As the rabbi mentioned, before coming to the US, I had served as State Secretary in our Ministry for Homeland Security. And after terrorist attacks, be it in Paris or Christchurch or in Orlando, I knew with terrifying clarity that we would see imitation violence elsewhere. It does not mean that these hate groups or terrorists were necessarily interlinked, although sometimes they were. But they were certainly interlinked by the reality of what they did and what they were inspired by. It was like instant contagion. In our days, hate speech, conspiracy theories, and group hatreds can resonate globally in ways we did not imagine in 2004. They travel with lightning speed. They inform echo chambers that unite communities far apart, and they can be used and fed with an outsider's agenda. When I read the Twitter feed of the former Russian president, I could not help but feel that this reversal of victim and perpetrator template, compounded by the vocabulary of Nazism that he pretended to condemn, was not only indicative of a profound ethical nihilism. Moral randomness and alternative truths have become a vehicle for foreign actors that use trolls against democracies to drive domestic conversations to extremes, fracturing societies and the fabric that holds them together. Now, one very important point. Please do not misunderstand me on this. I do not attempt, as it were, to dilute the very serious problem of persistent anti-Semitism in Germany in tendencies that we observe worldwide. We Germans need to fight it in Germany here and now, and in fact, we have been doing so for a very long time. But we cannot help observing the simultaneity between a rise of anti-Semitism in Germany and elsewhere and the global tendencies I tried to describe before. So maybe we can agree on that combating these tendencies and combating anti-Semitisms are policies which need to go hand in hand. So bear with me for this lengthy digression. I will now come back to the questions I asked myself on your behalf. Yes, anti-Semitism is on the rise in Germany. It is on the rise elsewhere too, including in the US. But in the country where the Holocaust originated, this assumes a special quality. 2,600 anti-Semitic criminal offenses, crimes, hate speech incidents were recorded in 2022 in Germany. There will also be a larger number of unreported incidents, so the overall picture will be even gloomier. Statistics show that most incidents come from the right wing, but there's anti-Semitism on the far left too, when criticism of Israel is framed with anti-Semitic stereotypes. And there's the phenomenon of immigrants who have little inclination to accept the responsibility that comes from a history they feel they do not share. And many of them have brought with them their region's perspective of and policy towards Israel. Last weekend's demonstrations in Berlin were a case in point. Arab demonstrators expressed their solidarity with Qassam brigades and hurled terrible anti-Semitic insults. But don't get me wrong. Statistics show that it is the far right that is responsible for the bulk of the incidents. In the case of immigrants, the question remains what integration can mean if we do not succeed in educating immigrants to adopt or, as it were, at least graduate into our societal consensus. And defying logic, COVID has been an accelerator of conspiracy theories, which often are a vehicle of anti-Semitism. Anti-vaccine demonstrations in Germany saw protesters wearing a yellow David star, insinuating an outrageous equivalence. They were trading in the same distorting and nihilistic conflation patterns as the former President Medvedev did in his tweet, reframing history to shape their vision of what present politics should be. Now, let's move to our response, both nationally and internationally. Nationally, Germany has adopted a national strategy against anti-Semitism and for Jewish life in Germany in November last year. It focuses on 5 areas, all of them interlinked. The first area is reorganizing data collection, research, information, the way we collect, the way we make it available, the way we include Jewish communities in this. This is important for all layers of government and service. The second area is education to prevent anti-Semitism. Holocaust education has been mandatory in German secondary schools for long. We now want to reach beyond schools. Education on anti-Semitism should be provided in a way that is tailored to target groups and at different times in life, in schools, during university, in professional settings. The third area is commemoration, culture of remembrance, awareness of history. And that's not only in the purview of federal authorities or the Länder. Schools and businesses have their responsibility too. The fourth area is punitive. Anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial or distortion are not covered by free speech. We have recently passed legislation that makes anti-Semitic motives in hate crimes or hate speech a factor that will aggravate sentences. There are also new laws against hate and hate speech in the internet, and we have created structures in federal anti-crime authorities and judiciaries to better deal with anti-Semitism. And the measures also include sanctions, like football banning orders for sports clubs. The punitive aspect is important as a deterrent, as a sign of zero tolerance, and a message of protection of Jewish citizens. And the fifth area focuses on Jewish life, past and present in Germany, making the communities more visible, empowering them, telling their story as the part of German story. When celebrating the 1700 years of Jewish life in German-speaking lands in 2021, this included countless events in schools and cultural settings. The first document on Jewish life in Germany dates back to 321, a decree by Emperor Constantine that permitted Jews to the magistrate of the city of Cologne. And finally, national action is just one strand. We live in a hyper-connected communication societies, and as noted before, contagion can be instant. We therefore need to join forces against the spread of anti-Semitism, its new forms, its new vehicles, its new patterns. The avenue is to seek out and concentrate on international formats with like-minded states. A forum like the OSCE will no more be able to produce consensus, and a member like Russia is more likely to actively deconstruct and hollow out normative consensus. Therefore, other fora are center stage today. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or the EU, where Germany has made the fight against anti-Semitism a key topic of its presidency back in 2020. Bilaterally, we are coordinating efforts to combat anti-Semitism with Israel, with France. Both the US and Germany have set up a bilateral Holocaust dialogue in which we aim to combat the increasing denial and falsification of the Holocaust. We're in close cooperation and exchange as the Biden administration is developing its own first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. We know that as democracies, we are being targeted. Our norms are, our truth cultures are, our societies are. Anti-Semitism is the oldest and most violent form of group hatreds, and it has become a vehicle to attack the very heart of democracy. The fight against it is a collective effort, both of our societies and of democratic nations. I'm proud to say that we are united on this. And to answer my last question, I'm confident that we shall overcome. It is a kind of gut confidence, but also informed by my having spent a career in observing situations, trends, and developments through the lens of a trained historian. There is no institutional anchor for anti-Semitism in Germany. Whoever supports it does so from a position of anonymity. Whenever a person of visibility comes even close to anti-Semitic messages, society fires back with the reliability and effectiveness of a well-operated Ukrainian anti-aircraft battery. There will be setbacks, but we have spent a long time and an enormous effort in building our defenses. They're strong. They will hold. Thank you.
So, Ambassador Haber, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the history of Reform Judaism, but traditionally there would not be applause in the synagogue unless the truth is spoken so beautifully, so clearly, and with such strength of conviction. And we are so grateful for your partnership, not only in the office you currently serve, but knowing that you're going to bring back the words that you hear not only tonight, but the experiences over these years, and that you'll continue to work to do what we're about to pray for all together. We know that it's a responsibility we all have to be partners in creating the world that God intended, a world that is one of wholeness, where there is not hatred, where there is tolerance, and where there are opportunities to work together, to be in partnership. And so we're grateful for your partnership over these past 5 years and before that, and we look forward to a continued partnership with you as you go forth, and we pray that you'll continue to go from strength to strength, and that you will enjoy and find some rejuvenation as you explore some other opportunities and a little bit of, again, well-earned downtime. We are so grateful for your words this evening, and even more the way in which you put those words into action each and every day. So thank you. And we turn now to a prayer that reminds us that we are all obligated to not just be inspired by Ambassador Haber's words, but to be inspired by our understanding that we make a commitment to one another and to continue to create God's world each and every day. And so we turn to the bottom of page 282 as we rise for Aleinu. We will continue on page 294, and we pause as we do during every service to remember those whose memories are with us always, whose lives inspire us to continue to work for a better tomorrow through their own example, and whose love continues to be not only in our hearts, not only in our minds, but through the stories we tell as well as through our actions in this world, as we honor their memory with the things that we do, with the ways in which we act. And so on this Shabbat, we think of those whose yahrzeit falls at this time: Melvin Abrahams, Jackie Alexander, Kenneth Annis, Herbert Stanley Asherman, Rose Backenheimer, Charlotte Bader, Esther Baumstein-Baskin, Sansom Becker, Augusta Bybin, Robert A. Birchman, Joan Bronstein, Lawrence Bullman, Philip Burka, Frida Chasman, Edwin Collier, Florence Kornfeld, Antoinette Kozel, Sylvia Dennis, Jack Diener, Ann Disson, Sophie Dressbald, Jacqueline Edlovich, Eva Hevesy Ehrlich, Milton Flax, Jacob Flyer, Aaron Friedenberg, Benjamin Friedman, Meyer Gelfand, Norman Goldberg, Lillian Goldberg, Lillian Golden, Louis Goldspinner, Bernice Goldstein, Herman Green, Evelyn Harris, John Edward Herman, Bella Hirsch, Adele Eisen, Henrietta Jackson, Sidney Jaffe, Miriam Kahn, Marion Katz, Joseph Kaufman, Nathan Koenig, Mary Kronheimer, Nicholas Kieneman, Anna Pelkin Lake, Rose Walters Levine, Arthur J. Lelyveld, William S. Miller, Sylvia Minkoff, Louis Monaker, Reuben Myers, Hannah Nathan, Pearl Nissenbaum, Janet G. Nordlinger, Tyler Nordlinger, Paul Perlman, Phyllis Perlman, Ray Pekin, Marty S. Pinson, Nettie Rausch, Shirley Riven, Lois Goodstein Robbins, Rachel S. Pomerantz, Michelle Weinraub, Emil Rosenthal, Sylvia Roth, James Ratto, Mary Sacknoff, Bernard Bud Sadoff, Irene Schlossberg, Phyllis Kolodner Schwartz, Jeanette Sherman, Francis Snyder, Daniel Sondheimer, Blanche Speisman, Louisa Stern, Alma Prince Strauss, Manya Tolkien, Amy Trachtman, Bartolo Ben Trimboli, Barry Wessler, Lillian Deborah Wexler, Louis Woodome, Abner Wilner, and Bessie R. Ura. We add to their names the names of those recently laid to rest: Melvin Greenblatt, Marty Abrams, Donald Goldman, Sam Amer, Ira Bluestein, Kitty Ann Rubin, Gregory Allen Keats, and Irving Mises. With all of these names in our hearts, calling others to mind as well, we rise together as we turn to page 294 and we join as we remember our own loved ones, and as is traditional in the Reform Jewish community, we also call to mind all those for whom there is no one left to say Kaddish, but whose memories are with us always. We stand as a community for them, not only the week of Yom HaShoah, but at all times we hold them in our hearts as well. Page 294. Yitgadal v'yizgadash shemei rabbah, ve'alma divrach harusei v'yamlich malchusei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beis Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam u'amei almaya. Yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yispa'ar v'yisromam v'yisnaseh. V'yisadar v'yisaleh v'yisalal shemei d'kudusha b'rechu. Le'elam min kol berchasa v'shirasa. Tush b'chasa v'nechemasa. Da'amiram b'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabbah min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn, and comfort to all who are bereaved among us, as we say together, amen. Please be seated. At this time, it's my honor to invite a member of our board of directors, Kimberly Walker-Fogel, who also is a key member of our membership committee, to present our Cami Lauren Nathanson Kiddush Cup to our B'nai Mitzvah.
Are we here? Okay, great. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for joining us. I am Kimberly Vogel, a member of the board and membership committee. We have wonderful opportunities to engage with Washington Hebrew and the community in the next few weeks. On Sunday, April 16th, join us to welcome author Andrew Lawler to the Amram Scholar Series. Mitzvah Day is coming up on April 23rd, and as a former chair, I encourage all of you to please sign up. There are projects at the Benjamin Center, here at Temple, and also in the community. You can sign up on the website. Mark your calendars for May 12th, and please come to Temple for Rabbi Shankman's installation Shabbat. We are very excited to celebrate. There is also information on our website and sponsorship opportunities. Finally, we have exciting Shabbats coming up. On April 21st, we will feature Israel at 75 celebration with the Greater Washington Jewish community. On May 5th, we are hosting a special musical guest, Jacob Spike Krause. And on June 2nd, we have Pride Shabbat to kick off Pride Month in style. Please take a copy of this week with you and use the QR code for more information or visit the website. Every Shabbat, we increase our joy by reciting Kiddush. This is a moment when we remember the miracle of the Exodus and celebrate our freedom. At Washington Hebrew Congregation, we also use this moment in our service to remember Cammie Lauren Nathanson and the power each person has to make an impact in our community and to change the world for the better. As we celebrate the milestone of our B'nai Mitzvah, Sophia Bortner and Julian Kirstein, we invite them to the Bima, along with all the children who are present tonight, to come forward and lead us in the Kiddush. May the vision of these young people give us strength, pride, and hope for a brighter future.
There are other kids here, but they're outside with the challah. They'll be in a second.
Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Voker, Yom Hashishi. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. The heaven and the earth were finished, and all their array. On the seventh day, God finished the work that God had been doing, and God ceased on the seventh day from all the work that God had done. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because on it God ceased from all the work of creation that God had done.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen.
Amen.
Praise you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. Praise you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who finding favor with us, sanctified us in his vote. In love and favor, you made the Holy Shabbat our heritage, as a reminder of the work of creation. As first among our sacred days, it recalls the exodus from Egypt. You chose us and set us apart from the peoples. In love and favor, you have given us your holy Shabbat as an inheritance. Praise you, Adonai, who sanctifies Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, Megiddo Shabbat.
Amen. We're going to join together in the chanting, and we join together on page 5. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava u'ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron l'maaseh bereshit, ki hu yom tehila l'mikra'e kodesh, zecher l'yetziat Mitzrayim, ki banu b'charta v'yotanu kidashta mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava u'ratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha'shabbat l'chaim.
key, though we can all join with them. We thank them for bringing our challah up. Yeah, well, people over here can't quite see them, but that's okay.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
But in a moment, we're going to have a chance to, after we have our closing song, we'll all be able to join together in our oneg and enjoy some, not just the food that we're going to eat, but also we'll nourish our bodies, but we'll also nourish our souls through our connections with one another. And so we'll join in a motzi before we do that.
Ooh.
So that one had a baby.
It did.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lehem min haaretz te'afon.
That is a homemade one.
Yes, you can do a taste test. There is one that is homemade and two that are not. So you can see if you can taste the difference. But they're not gonna eat all of it. They're gonna take it out there, and we'll all be able to grab a piece of challah.
Are we going to bless them first?
Oh yes, we're gonna do a blessing over our children, and then you want to do this one? It's a little bigger. And then careful, don't giggle too much, or the challah is gonna slide right off the plate. Some backups here. In a moment when we leave, we'll be able to grab a piece of challah on our way out. But in the meantime, we're going to ask a blessing upon our b'nai mitzvah, as well as all of our children. Hold on. And this is where we need some additional height, perhaps. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and watch over you.
May God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God's presence be with you today and always. May God give you the gift and the blessing of peace. Amen. Sorry about that. I knocked it off.
As you all go back to your seats, we wish a mazel tov to Julian and Sophia. Any other announcements?
We invite you to not only to join us at our Night Shabbat, but also if you have questions about Washington Hebrew, there's some information around the lobby. And if you are here for the first time, we look forward to greeting you. We also have a number of board members. You can tell they have a little bit of yellow, I think, on the name tag. But there's so many other congregants who are here as well who can answer any questions you might have. And we look forward to greeting you and to connecting with new friends and longtime friends as we wish each other Shabbat Shalom. And before we do that, we're going to join in the singing of Ein Keloheinu on page
322. It's traditional. You don't even need it. I promise. Ein Keloheinu, Ein Adonenu, Ein Kemokeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Micheloheinu, Michadonenu, Michemokeinu, Michemoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Elokeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu.
Before we leave this sacred place, we wish a mazel tov to the Bortner family and to the Kirstein family on their upcoming B'nai Mitzvah. As well, a thank you again to Ambassador Emily Haber for joining us this evening. I know she looks forward to greeting you at our Night Shabbat, and a thank you to Leslie Maitland for helping make the connection. And we say, Adonai, Yishmor Tzeitecha, U'echa Me'etcha V'ad Olam. Oh God, guard our going out, our coming in. May each of our moments, coming and going, be filled with peace and with holiness. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.